Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. 3 notifications chimed in perfect, terrifying unison, shattering the silence of the penthouse elevator like a gunshot. I didn't even have time to look down at the cracked screen of my phone before the steel doors slid open, and the air, thick, heavy, and suffocating with the scent of ozone and burnt cedar, hit me with the force of a physical blow. Standing in the foyer weren't the beta assistants or the security guards I expected. Instead, 3 predators stood in a loose semicircle, their eyes glowing with distinct, predatory hues in the dim light, all fixed on me. My knees buckled, instinct screaming at me to run, to hide, to drop, but the neural implant in my wrist burned hot enough to blister skin, searing the connection into my nervous system. I had played God with the matchmaking algorithm, hoping for a shield, but as the tallest of them stepped forward, the floor beneath me vibrating with his low growl, I realized I hadn't summoned a protector. I had summoned the apocalypse. Julian gasped, clutching his wrist as he stumbled out of the elevator, his back hitting the cold marble wall of the foyer. The pain in his wrist was nothing compared to the crushing weight of the pheromones flooding the room. It was a biological assault. Triple compatibility, a voice murmured, smooth as velvet but sharp as a scalpel. Statistically impossible. And yet, here he is. Julian forced his eyes up. He knew them. Everyone in the city of Neo-Viridia knew them. They were the triumvirate of the Cobalt District, billionaires who owned the skyline and the shadows beneath it. In the center stood Silas Vane, the CEO of Vane Heavy Industries. He was a towering figure of ice and discipline, wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than Julian's entire life debt. His scent was cold steel and rain, overwhelming and authoritative. To his right, leaning casually against a Greek bust with a cigarette dangling from his lips, was Dante Ree, the heir to the Ree criminology empire. He was chaos incarnate, his shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest, revealing tattoos that crawled up his neck. His scent was burnt sugar, gunpowder, and leather. And to the left, pacing slowly with his hands behind his back, was Kalen Thorne, the tech mogul. He looked the most approachable, with soft blonde hair and spectacles, but Julian knew better. Thorne was the strategist, the viper. His scent was deceptively sweet, night-blooming jasmine and antiseptic. Julian's voice cracked. The Omega instinct to bare his neck was overwhelming, a biological imperative triggered by the sheer potency of 3 prime alphas in one room. He bit his tongue until he tasted copper, using the pain to ground himself. I think there's been a mistake. The algorithm doesn't make mistakes, little Omega, Dante drawled, pushing off the statue. He moved with the fluid grace of a panther, stopping inches from Julian. He inhaled deeply near Julian's neck, making Julian shudder. You reek of desperation. And lavender. God, he smells like high-grade purity, Silas. Back off, Dante, Silas ordered. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a gavel strike. He is shaking. If he goes into shock, the neural feedback will incapacitate us all. Silas stepped forward, his icy blue eyes analyzing Julian like a broken spreadsheet. You used the Fated Connect black market update, the one that bypasses genetic safety locks. Julian nodded, tears pricking his eyes. I needed a match immediately. My heat is due in 3 days. The debt collectors, the Viper clan. They said if I wasn't bonded, I was fair game. Kalen stopped pacing. He adjusted his glasses, the lenses reflecting the terrified Omega. So, you hacked the server to force a high-level match to protect yourself from loan sharks? And instead of one guardian, the system, in its infinite glitching wisdom, triangulated your genetic markers and bonded you to the 3 highest compatibility profiles in the database. Kalen laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You have effectively leashed 3 tigers to a single rabbit. I can undo it. Julian lied, his breath hitching. I can just delete the account. If you sever the connection now, the neural shock will lobotomize you, Silas said coldly. And because the bond has already initialized phase 1, we would suffer a stroke. We are stuck, mister. Julian Gray, he whispered. We are stuck, Julian, Silas finished. Until the heat passes and the bond settles. Which means you are coming with us. The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel, suspended high above the smog of the lower districts. It was a neutral ground the three alphas shared for business dealings, but now it felt like a cage. 3 days. Julian had 3 days before his biology betrayed him completely. The preheat fever was already simmering in his blood, making his skin sensitive to the touch and his mind foggy. But he couldn't afford to be weak. He was a researcher, a historian of old-world tactics. He had to think his way out of this harem dynamic before it swallowed him whole. The power dynamics in the house were terrifyingly complex. Silas was the law. He dictated the schedule, the meals, the security protocols. He treated Julian like a fragile, expensive artifact that he resented owning but refused to let break. Dante was the instigator. He enjoyed pushing boundaries, invading Julian's personal space just to see Silas twitch or Kalen frown. He was the most physical, constantly touching Julian, a hand on the small of his back, a brush of fingers against his cheek, feeding on the reaction. Kalen was the observer. He watched Julian with unnerving intensity, tracking his calorie intake, his heart rate, his sleep patterns via the house AI. On the second night, the tension snapped. Julian was in the kitchen, trying to brew tea to calm his racing heart. The suppression pills he had taken were losing their efficacy against the pheromone density of the apartment. He dropped a spoon, the clatter echoing loudly. Before he could bend down, a hand gripped his waist, hoisting him up onto the marble counter. Julian gasped, finding himself face to face with Dante. The alpha's dark eyes were blown wide, his pupils consuming the iris. "You're scorching hot, sweetheart," Dante murmured, nuzzling into the curve of Julian's neck. "Why fight it? You know what your body wants. You match with us." "I'm matched with an algorithm," Julian spat, pushing against Dante's solid chest. "I didn't ask to be shared like a meal. Sharing isn't really my style," Dante growled, his hand sliding up Julian's thigh. "But for you, I might make an exception. Or maybe I'll just take my bite before the others get here." Dante. The name was spoken softly, but it froze the room. Kalen stood in the doorway, holding a tablet. Silas was right behind him, looking thunderous. "Get your hands off him," Silas warned, his pheromones flaring, turning the air so cold it felt like winter had breached the walls. Dante didn't recoil. He grinned, sharp and dangerous. "He's in distress, see? I'm just offering comfort. That's what a mate does." "You are accelerating his cycle," Kalen noted clinically, though his knuckles were white as he gripped the tablet. "If he goes into full heat before his body is acclimated to our combined genetic strain, his heart will stop." "Then let's acclimate him," Dante challenged. "Why are we pretending we don't want this? Look at us. We've been at each other's throats for a decade over territory, stocks, and shipping lanes. And suddenly, we all agree on one thing." He gestured to Julian. "Him." Silas walked forward, the sound of his dress, shoes heavy on the tile. He stopped in front of Julian, ignoring Dante entirely. He placed a hand on Julian's forehead, checking his temperature. The touch was surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to his icy demeanor. "Julian," Silas said, his voice dropping an octave. "Look at me." Julian trembled, locking eyes with the CEO. The intensity of the bond thrummed between them, a golden cord of possessiveness. "The Viper clan," Silas said abruptly. "How much do you owe them?" 5 million credits, Julian whispered, shame burning his cheeks. "My father. He gambled it. I inherited the debt." Silas hummed. "Pocket change. It's my life," Julian cried out, frustration bubbling over. "I'm not like you. I don't own worlds. I just wanted to survive." "And you will," Kalen interjected, stepping closer. "But you need to understand the position you have put us in. We cannot pay your debt." Julian blinked. "What? If we pay it," Silas explained, "it signals to the underworld that you are merely a purchase. A sugar baby. It makes you a target for kidnapping again and again. To protect you, we cannot buy you out." "Then what?" Julian asked, his voice trembling. "We have to claim you," Dante whispered, leaning in close again. "Publicly. Viscerally. So that every lowlife in this city knows that touching you means declaring war on the triumvirate." Julian looked between the three of them. The cold strategist, the chaotic brawler, the calculating genius. They were monsters of the modern age. And they were his. "My heat," Julian breathed. "It starts tomorrow." Then we have tonight, Silas declared, to prepare and to settle the hierarchy of this arrangement. The attack came at dawn, just as the fever broke Julian's resistance. He woke up screaming, his body on fire. The heat had hit fast and hard, bypassing the usual slow burn. But beneath the biological fire, there was a sharper, colder fear. The security alarms were blaring. Stay here. Kalen's voice came from the bedroom door. He was already dressed in tactical gear, a sleek pistol in his hand. It was a jarring sight for the soft-spoken tech mogul. The Vipers. They bypassed the perimeter. Someone sold them the access codes. Dante. Julian gasped, clutching the silk sheets. He's in the hallway. He's enjoying himself. Kalen grimaced. Silas is securing the elevator. Julian, listen to me. Do not leave this room. But Julian couldn't just sit. The bond in his head was screaming. He could feel their emotions, Dante's bloodlust, Silas's cold rage, Kalen's calculation. And beneath it all, a spike of pain. Silas. Julian scrambled out of bed. His legs were weak, shaking from the heat, but adrenaline flooded his system. He grabbed a heavy bronze statue from the nightstand, a ridiculous weapon, but better than nothing. He stumbled into the hallway. The scene was chaotic. Smoke filled the air. Dante was a blur of motion, engaging 3 men in close quarters combat, his laughter echoing maniacally. But down the hall, near the elevator, Silas was on one knee. A man in a heavy combat suit, a Viper heavy hitter, had him pinned, a vibroblade inching towards Silas's throat. Silas was holding the blade back with one hand, but his other arm hung uselessly at his side, blood dripping from a gunshot wound. No, Julian screamed. The logic of the Omegaverse dictated that Omegas were submissive, fragile, created to be protected. But the bond worked both ways. The surge of protective fury that exploded in Julian's chest was pure alpha-grade aggression. He didn't think. He ran. The Viper assassin didn't perceive Julian as a threat. That was his mistake. Julian didn't attack the man. He attacked the environment. He hurled the bronze statue not at the assassin, but at the fire suppression control panel on the wall next to them. The panel shattered. Halon gas and high-pressure foam exploded outward with the force of a cannon. The assassin, blinded and knocked off balance by the blast, faltered. That split second was all Silas needed. With a roar that shook the walls, Silas surged up, ignoring his wounded arm. He drove his good fist into the assassin's throat, crushing the windpipe. Silas stood over the fallen body, chest heaving, blood dripping from his suit. He looked at Julian. Julian stood there, panting, wearing nothing but a silk robe, shivering from the heat and the violence. Silas crossed the distance in 2 strides. He didn't speak. He grabbed Julian, pulling him into a crushingly tight embrace. The contact sent a shock wave through the bond that brought both of them to their knees. You idiot, Silas growled into Julian's hair, his composure completely shattered. You foolish, reckless idiot. You could have been killed. You were hurt, Julian sobbed, the adrenaline crashing. I felt it. Dante appeared through the smoke, wiping blood from his lip. Kalen followed, holstering his weapon. They saw Silas holding Julian, saw the destruction Julian had caused to save him. The dynamic shifted. Visibly. Before, Julian was a problem to be solved, a prize to be guarded. Now, as Dante looked at the fierce determination in Julian's tear-filled eyes, and Kalen calculated the odds of an Omega entering a firefight to save an Alpha, they realized the truth. He wasn't a rabbit. He was the catalyst that made them a pack. Clear, Dante said, his voice unusually soft. He walked over, dropping to his knees beside the pile of limbs that was Silas and Julian. Everyone is down. The Vipers are done. The heat, Kalen noted, stepping closer. It's peaking, Julian whimpered. The danger was over, and his biology was remembering what it needed. The scent of violence, of blood, and of 3 victorious alphas was an aphrodisiac potent enough to drown his rational mind. Help me, Julian pleaded, looking up at them. Please. Silas pulled back, framing Julian's face with his large hands. Are you sure, Julian? Once we cross this line, once we complete the bond during a heat, there is no undoing it. We are yours. You are ours. Forever. Julian looked at Dante, who offered a crooked, bloody smile. He looked at Kalen, who nodded solemnly. He looked at Silas, whose icy eyes were burning with a terrifying devotion. "I don't want to undo it," Julian whispered. Silas scooped Julian up into his arms, standing effortlessly despite his injury. "Dante, secure the doors," Silas commanded, carrying Julian toward the master bedroom. "Kalen, cut the feeds. The world doesn't get to see this." "As you wish," Kalen murmured, tapping his watch. Finally, Dante growled, following them, his eyes glowing gold in the dim light. As they entered the bedroom, the heavy doors clicked shut, sealing out the world, the debt, and the danger. All that remained was the heat, the bond, and the three kings who were about to bow to their new center. And that is how the desperate scholar tamed the three monsters of Neo-Viridia. If you enjoyed seeing Julian risk it all to save his alpha, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you trust an algorithm to choose your soulmate if it meant bonding with three people at once? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,